So Dan McDonnell has joined us. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Oh, it's Christmas Eve for you, is it?
Oh yeah, I love it. I love when the League of Ireland comes back. It does. Yeah, get the Friday nights.
You don't sound very sincere there.
I know I do. Yeah. I absolutely, genuinely do. I think there's not a huge amount of people out there feeling that way, but those that do, the Friday nights in the winter, they drag because it's a long off season. It's not like the Premier League where it's almost, if you have a major tournament somewhere, it's almost like 5 weeks or something, and it's right back. This is probably the last Friday night round of fixtures would have been the end of October. It's actually earlier this year. That's a good thing because they've gone to a 10-team league, so it's 36 games. So we now start in the middle of February. A couple of years back it was the first weekend in March. So that's a long off season. And you speak to players and people involved, it would drive them absolutely crazy just to wait for it. So it's good to have it back.
Have you done the pod this week?
We did. Myself and Johnny did our podcast this week.
We have our own podcast.
I know there's an off-the-ball one as well. All very good. We had Jared Bryan. We had Jared Bryan and Aaron who was in with Keith Andrews last week. You see that, a bit of cross-code.
Yeah. I wouldn't call that cross-code. It would be that seeing that somebody who's really good off the ball and then nicking them for your own.
We've had him on last year a couple of times, to be fair. So we did. We had a lengthy preview, and there is a lot of people doing their stuff, and I think in the sort of the way media is now, that the podcast market has probably worked quite well, I think, for the league, because it services a sort of an audience that's really passionate about it and want to sort of get as much as they can this week, and I think there is a good buzz around the season. Maybe people say that every year, but it feels a bit more sincere.
Like other leagues, we don't have to ask what sort of state the league is in at the start of the season. Are we past having to ask that about the League of Ireland?
Not quite getting. It's still a question. When Bray Wanderers stuff happened last year, but it is true that the debates we have are always like you go to talk about the League of Ireland, and it's always a bigger picture debate of, well, where are things going. There's never a sense of you fully debate the football and where things are now. You want to aspire towards that, but I think there's imperfections there that you want to get rid of, but so you can genuinely have that discussion. But there are good things going on. I did watch the Keith Andrews show earlier with Kevin Doyle speaking about underage leagues and so on, and we've spoken about it on the show before, but at least it's something that's new that's going on at the moment. For the last 30-40 years you can have a lot of recurring debates, but I think what we are seeing now is the personality of the league is changing slightly. It's becoming a much younger league, and what we would have seen last year after a slow couple of years maybe would have been 7, 8, 9 players going away from first team clubs to England, with the Sean Maguire and Kevin O'Connor, and even the guys in the off season, McMillan, McElhenney, and even younger guys, Warren O'Hara from Bows, who's gone to Brighton. And the challenge is to almost regenerate that. If you lose 5 or 6 years back, there was a talent drain and there wasn't players there to replace them. You would hope with the leagues and the national leagues now that
do you feel there is? Because I looked at the teams for the President's Cup last week, and to be honest, I didn't recognise a huge amount of the names in the Dundalk team.
Yeah, well, they've changed their squad over the winter, and they've actually maybe gone outside for a couple of players, but also this week they've gone the route of bringing a few lads home. Daniel Cleary from Liverpool and Birmingham, he went to Liverpool as a kid, was around a couple of Europa League squads. I think might have talked about him here a couple of times, didn't just quite get there. He's come home. There's a guy, Sam Byrne at Everton, whose brother is the rugby player Adam, and he's signing on loan as well. They've had to look outside the league to strengthen a bit, but I just think at the likes of Bows and some other clubs, Shamrock Rovers very naturally as well, with some exciting young players they have there. I'm happy with the league's personality being that. The league I went to when I was a kid was sort of the old part-time lads, and there was a romance about some of it, Patsy Frayne having a smoke on the bench and all that type of thing after he was subbed off, and I think, but you have to naturally evolve and move beyond that. And if people can see it as the place where you'll see the next Sean Maguire or the next whoever it might be, and I think with the way things are at the national team at the moment anyway, there's a recognition that the League of Ireland is more important than it's ever been in the Irish football landscape. I think that's something that can at least change the script a small bit.
Yeah, sorry, John Caulfield's been quite critical of the coverage as well. Is that an argument that you could level? Do you see that? Because speaking to people over the last couple of days, that some would feel that there's more games being shown than ever, but John Caulfield himself feels as though there should be a game a week. Is that right? Even around the coverage of the President's Cup game last week.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sold on the game a week thing myself, but I think his argument about moving games to Thursday nights rights for live TV. I'm completely in favour of that concept. I mean, it is natural enough. I mean, the figures aren't fantastic for Friday night games, but there's a good chunk of the audience that would sit down and watch it are out at games themselves on a Friday night. And I like the idea of the Thursday night game and making it a bit of an event and a fixture. And there will be weeks where there's clashes, there'll be Europa League clashes and so on, but there's actually not too many of them across the season. And I mean, the Europa League is sort of denigrated many times, and then all of a sudden in the context of the Thursday night League of Ireland debate, it's the Europa League is going to be on. So
Cork, though, are the best supported team in the league.
Yeah.
Like, they're in this bizarre situation, League of Ireland clubs, and maybe it is the only league in the world where clubs arguably lose money by having their game on television.
Yeah, this has been the problem, but I would think that that's something that should be tackled. If you make the game enough of an event, that shouldn't be an issue. And in fact, I would have banged that drum a few times before myself, and sometimes games you feel are being picked just to meet your quota. And I mean, it's an unglamorous game, and I think the casual fans it gives them a reason not to go. However, like the big games that have been on TV, you think of the Cork Dundalk games and so on, they haven't been affected in any way by crowd on the gate whatsoever. Bows Rovers wouldn't be affected by it. It's just sometimes the TV games, I think he also made a very good point about, they're stacked. There'll be 6 or 7 games in the next couple of weeks, then there'll be 6 weeks without it. So if you're trying to build up a regular audience, and then it goes for a month or 6 weeks. So I think there's a way to be more consistent and devise a plan rather than just a scattergun policy.
Are clubs doing enough to get people in? So we had Kieran Donaghy on in the past hour, and what they've done down in Tralee with the basketball is pretty remarkable, considering there was no club 2 years ago, and now they're getting up in 1,000 people every Saturday night because they've made it, well, basically almost a mini NBA. They've looked at what the NBA do in terms of entertainment and taken and done a budget version of that. But it's a family night out, everyone goes, everyone has a good time, and in some ways the result is irrelevant. It feels as though that the
would you want that to go all glam like that? Or would you want that?
You see, I think there is a halfway house that you don't want it to be so cultish that unless you're all in on supporting your local side, unless you're there every week, you're not made welcome. Whereas actually, if you're putting stuff on that makes it a welcoming family experience, maybe it does become more of a habit on a Friday night. It doesn't have to be hardcore.
I guess, do we quite have the facilities everywhere around the country to create that atmosphere? I think one of the problems that the league faces is there's an inequality there between certain clubs, and certain clubs are able to offer certain things that others wouldn't be able to offer. I would take it. I mean, I know you had someone on the Saturday panel from Bohemians before who, they were in a relegation battle last season, but I just know from going to games there that their crowds have gone up, the atmosphere around the ground has gone up, they've got their act together in the community. When in fact, when Bows were winning leagues 10 or 11 years ago, I didn't feel the same vibe around the club that you would get now. It's clearly something that they've worked at, and I mean, the crowds were up around the league last year. Generally, I think the fact that Cork were doing very well, they were almost the main contributor in that. But I think clubs slowly but surely have become more proactive in that department. I would be loath to say that the penny has dropped completely, and I think facilities remains, to me, the obstacle to the kind of stuff that you were talking about there. If the basketball's indoors, like there's certain things that people aren't going to face that you might encounter at a League of Ireland ground. But I mean, you do have Tala and Turner's Cross in places. You go to Turner's Cross on a Friday night, and it's great. Like after the games at Turner's Cross, if you want to go and feel hope about the future of the league, after the games, the Cork players are coming out, and there's like hundreds of kids there waiting to get autographs. The likes of Kev wouldn't be giving them.
They're not giving their jerseys away, are they?
But some players there would, and that's something.
They're good lads.
But that's something. But that's something you can feel, like that there's an identity there, and I mean, you do have to start them young. Ultimately, you want to appeal to the 30-somethings or people listening who've never gone, and you hope it. But realistically, where it starts is at the younger age groups, and they have to foster that community identity. And there's progress, but there's still a hell of a way to go in that regard.
Is it Cork against Dundalk again?
I personally think so, although Shamrock Rovers are knocking on the door, and I mean they start off with away to Bows tomorrow night, Dublin Derby, and then home against Dundalk next week. So I mean, within 2 weeks' time, we could be talking about Rovers as title contenders, and certainly it is the club that has some of the players that might come onto our radar in a different sort of scope, in the next couple of years, in the sense that they have Trevor Clark there, they have Aaron Bulger, a young midfielder there. They've Graham Burke, who come home from England, some really young talented players who, if they if they sort of got it together, they could go very well. They'd also probably have to face interest in the summer, which is the other thing. But I still think that Cork and Dundalk are that bit further ahead in their evolution. Cork in particular have just tweaked things a bit since losing Sean Maguire. They, over the winter, they've strengthened from other clubs in the league. And what we have seen is that Cork, Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers are now able to go and pluck players from other clubs. They even paid transfer fees last summer, which is a bit unusual here. Cork to sign Kieran Sadlier from Sligo, who's going to be a big player this year, and someone again.
I'm not afraid to talk him up either.
No, they know he's got all the ability in the world. What's noticeable about the comments from the Cork camp is that they're saying he's got everything right in the attacking sense. He just needs to work maybe on going the other way. But this is a guy who's English born, Irish qualified, came over to Ireland to sort of get his career going again, having been at West Ham and Peterborough, and did well at Sligo. But he's gone to Cork, and by all accounts he's gone down that route over the winter of the gym, strengthening up, having himself physically ready to go, and he's very good friends with Sean Maguire. They were at West Ham together, so I mean they overlapped for 2 or 3 weeks, and they were delighted to be back together for that short space of time. But in Sean Maguire, I think Sadlier has the role model to follow. You can see Maguire tweeting him and speaking about him. They know he's got the ability, and he's effectively trying to go on that.
It's important that Cork did replace the goals, didn't they, from Sean Maguire? They didn't seem to find the net consistently enough after he left. Of course, he'd done so well anyway.
No, and that is still a question mark. They've brought a guy, Graham Cummins, back from St Johnstone. I mean, he was involved at first team level there. Ironically enough, possibly replaced by Dave McMillan. I mean, one of his last games for St Johnstone, he scored at Ibrox. He was around the first team squad there. He's 30. He's an ex-Cork City player. He's come back and he's going to be up front, but he's a different type of player. And they've signed Barry McNamee from Derry City, who's a very creative sort of number 10 type player, and they've got Carl Shepherd still there, but it's a different front four to what they had last year. But I mean, I watched them play Dundalk in the second half. It was a weak in Dundalk side, but they still scored 4 goals in the second half in that President's Cup game, and you're thinking, yeah, this team could be pretty good. So
what's going on with Dundalk? Because they feel like a team sort of stuck in limbo, maybe because of the money that's arrived in the club, that League of Ireland teams sense that they have money. They're not going to let their players go to them cheaply. They're looking for fees which Dundalk either can't pay or won't pay. So as you say, they're looking abroad at younger players to bring in. Have they been able to fully capitalise on that run in the Europa League?
I think it's a fair question. They just kept losing players, and they've lost players at the end of every season, and even last season just gone. I mean, they still lost Patrick McElhenney and Dave McMillan, and going into the best year they had, which was 2016, obviously. I mean, that winter, they lost Richie Towell. They brought in Robbie Benson and Patrick McElhenney, and that was almost pretty much it. So it was a very settled team that had been together for a couple of years, that just went there from the start and cracked on. The last 2 seasons, it feels like at the start of the season, they're still signing players. There's injuries. They're not as settled as Cork are at the moment. But they'd had an okay pre-season up until the Cork game, it must be said. They were away in Spain. They beat FC Seoul. I think the Korean champions apparently played very well in that game. Beat a Brentford B team that came over here, and there were some good signs. And I still think they have the bones of a very good team there. They just maybe don't have that settled unit that Cork have, and they need to start the season well and not lose the distance that they lost last year, because I mean the league was over after a third of last season, and I don't think it will happen this time, but you can't allow it to happen. I
was surprised when I picked up the Examiner this morning to see Stephen O'Donnell saying that Waterford were the dark horses. What have Waterford been doing over the summer? Or over the winter? That's the thing. It's ingrained in your head, isn't it?
Off season. I
still do that. Like, it's inexcusable.
So they were first division champions last year.
Yeah, Waterford got promoted last year, but they were effectively like a professional club in the first division last year, which is unusual. Lee Power, who's a Swindon Town guy, is the owner, but effectively Alan Reynolds is the manager, but Pat Fenton is the director of football and is involved in a lot of the recruitment. And essentially they had a good team already, and they've recruited quite well in the off season. Some good players sort of locally. I mean, Izzy Akinade at Bowes, Gavin Holohan.
I Gavin was part of my reserve team up at Hull, so
really?
He was very much on the verge of making it at Hull. It was just one of those things. Probably had a strong squad at the time.
He's a talented player. I think even here he was at Cork City in he's a creative player, and they couldn't quite just find a role for him in that Cork team at that time, and he seems to have got his career back going again. And they've signed a few players, with that sort of profile, and they've also Bastien Herry, a guy who was at Limerick last year, a French midfielder, and they've brought in a couple of wild card guys with contacts that they have, a couple of guys from Holland, a guy who was at Ajax as a teenager, Stanley Adoria, I think his name is, who played at 17 for Ajax first team level. So and people who've seen them in pre-season seem to have been quite impressed. So there is sometimes a team that comes up, they have that momentum, and in fact you see it in any league anywhere. In the you see the Championship this year, Sheffield United or someone comes up and they're used to winning and they just push on again. And maybe there is that element with Waterford that, we're talking, a lot of the talk this week is about the games tomorrow night in Dublin. Waterford's first game back, the crowds are good. That the crowd down there could rival anything that happens in Dublin. And in fact, the regional strength of the league is another talking point at the moment as well, that around the country there's regional bases doing well that maybe weren't doing well 5-6 years ago.
It is the 10-team league, which has a lot of negatives when it's first mooted, and probably last season had a lot of negatives, and I'm sure down in Galway they're not particularly pleased with the change. But now that it's here, it feels as though actually it's going to be a particularly strong league, that you're looking there and that it's hard to see where the real weak league is. Maybe Bray, if the off the field
and Limerick
again.
Have had financial struggles in the off season. Unfortunately, their manager left on the first day of the season, Neil McDonnell, too. I think you dealt with Neil before. He left, and certainly there was worries about the finances there. So it's not perfect. What
is it? One down, one into a playoff.
One down, one into a playoff, and then there's a sort of a convoluted playoff route for the teams in the first division. But I was never that down in the 10-team idea, because I'm convinced that the way forward is to get the base standard in the Premier Division up. I think we should aspire to every team in the Premier Division being full-time within a couple of years, and it just logically you have a better chance of that with 10 than you do with 12 or 14. And there's a certain amount of good players to go around, and I think they've been condensed into 10 teams now. And I would hope that the bar will be set quite high this year. You'd still be very concerned about the Bray situation in Limerick, but if Galway had been in there maybe instead of Bray, you would have a very strong 10 team with a nice regional spread around the country. And I think these 10 teams, more should be asked of them in terms of ground standards and all the stuff we touched on earlier. I think there comes a point
in terms of licensing.
You can't just turn a blind eye to stuff and say they'll get it fixed, they'll get that sorted out. If you want to go, like John Caulfield said, if you want to go somewhere, then are we just going to go around in the same sort of, we're just changing the structure again, 10 to 12, 12 to 10. The change to 10 matters if there's a standard that come with it, a new standard that comes with that, and that's what you hope this season brings.
What about my boys in Inchicore, St Pat's?
I believe you're going to become a St Pat's fan. This is the new development of the off season.
Is Michael D a St Pat's fan now? Is that where
he's everybody?
No,
he goes
Longford Town. Longford Town, if you say Longford Town, but I live up that way, so I'll get to games if I can.
That is, we've heard this. He's ready to go on board. He's hitched to several wagons already.
If I'm here, that's it.
That is the catch cry of many sort of casual. If I can, I'll get there when I can. But he has spoken about it. A statement of intent of sorts.
Have they a corporate section of Pat's?
Come on. You're such a tool. Honest to God, you just
There is a director's box of sorts in there. But if you're going to go with Brian Kerr, Brian goes and stands in the Camac on the far side, and he gets properly stuck in. He will be spotted there.
The referee's ears are burning by the end.
Players, whoever it might be. I think we will see him there at some stage. I'm determined it will happen.
Hey, hope you enjoyed that latest offering from Off the Ball. If you want to subscribe, and you should, check out just up here. All our latest stuff is just down here. Generally, knock yourself out.